He gave James Brown his moves, but died forgotten in an empty house. Joe Tex's true story will change how you see soul music. Joe Tex should have been a legend. He had the voice, the moves, the charm, and the stage power to stop crowds in their tracks. Even Little Richard once said that James Brown stole his whole act from Joe Tex. But while James Brown became a global icon, Joe Tex faded away, left behind by the industry, the media, and even some of his fans. His songs were powerful, his lyrics smart, his performances unforgettable. Yet his name doesn't come up when people talk about soul music's greatest artists. His final years were filled with silence, sadness, and mystery. Today his house sits abandoned. But Joe Tex's story is not over. This is the real story of the man who inspired giants but died a mystery. Joe Tex was born Joseph Arrington Jr. on August 8, 1935, in Rogers, Texas, a small town where dreams seemed as distant as the nearest big city. His parents separated early, and young Joe moved in with his grandmother, a woman who would become his first audience and biggest supporter. Life wasn't easy in rural Texas during the Great Depression. His mother eventually moved to Baytown, Texas, seeking better opportunities, and Joe followed. Even as a child, he worked hard shining shoes on street corners, delivering newspapers before dawn, and doing anything to help his family survive. But Joe wasn't just a worker, he had something special burning inside him. He could sing, dance, joke, and perform for anyone who would stop and watch. Neighbors would gather on porches just to hear him sing church hymns with a voice that seemed too big for his small frame. At school, he joined the choir and learned the baritone saxophone, discovering he had a natural ear for harmony and rhythm. In church, his voice stood out among the congregation. He wasn't just singing, he was already telling stories, painting pictures with his words in ways that made people stop and listen. The young Joe Tex was a natural entertainer, but he was also an observer. He watched how music affected people, how a well-timed joke could turn a crowd, how a slow ballad could make grown men cry. These early lessons would shape his entire approach to performance. While other kids played games, Joe practiced his craft, turning every conversation into potential material for a song. By high school, Joe was entering talent shows across Houston, driving to competitions in borrowed cars with hopes bigger than his wallet. In one big event at the City Auditorium, he competed against rising stars like Johnny Nash, who would later become famous for "I Can See Clearly Now." Joe blew the crowd away with his combination of smooth vocals and electrifying stage presence. He won $300 more money than his family had seen in months, and earned a trip to Harlem, New York to stay at the famous Hotel Theresa. The Hotel Theresa was legendary in the black community, known as the Waldorf of Harlem. It was where jazz greats stayed, where deals were made, and where dreams either came true or died. For a young man from rural Texas, walking into that lobby was like entering another world. There, Joe took the stage at the Apollo Theater's Amateur Night, the most feared stage in America, where audiences were known to boo performers off stage without mercy. But the audience loved him. He kept winning contests in New York, building a reputation as a performer who could connect with any crowd. Before long, a music executive named Henry Glover, who had worked with legends like Wynonie Harris and Hank Ballard, offered him a recording contract with King Records. Joe was only 19 years old. It was the beginning of a career that would shape soul music in ways few people realize today. Moving to New York was a big step for a young man who had never been far from Texas. Joe didn't have much money, so he worked side jobs to survive, including cooking at a Jewish cemetery, a job that taught him about different cultures and deepened his understanding of human struggle. But his dream stayed alive through every long shift and lonely night. He started recording under the name Joe Tex, a mix of his first name and his home state, a decision that would brand him forever as a Texas original. Between 1955 and 1957, he recorded songs like My Biggest Mistake and She's. None of them were hits, but they showed Joe's growing talent and his ability to write songs that spoke to real experiences. His voice had a distinctive quality, smooth but with an edge, tender but strong enough to fill a room. In 1959, Joe claimed he wrote the song Fever, which later became a huge hit for Little Willie John and then Peggy Lee. Joe said he sold it to a King Records executive just to pay rent and buy groceries. While others got rich off the song, earning royalties for decades, Joe was left behind, watching his creation make other people famous. This experience taught him a hard lesson about the music business. Talent wasn't enough if you didn't protect your interests. Joe didn't quit though. After King Records, he joined Ace Records in 1958 and kept recording, determined to find his sound. Still, nothing hit the charts, but these years weren't wasted. They shaped him as an artist and a performer. Touring with stars like Little Richard and Jackie Wilson, Joe started developing his famous stage style. He learned to flip microphones with style, dance like no one else, and use comedy to win over crowds even when his songs weren't familiar. He studied every performer he shared the stage with, absorbing their techniques and developing his own unique approach. While others focused solely on vocals, Joe understood that great performance was about the complete package: the voice, the movement, the connection with the audience, and the ability to tell a story that made people feel something real. Even when his songs weren't selling, his shows were unforgettable. By 1960, he tried Anna Records and recorded a powerful version of All I Could Do Was Cry. His voice was maturing, gaining the depth and emotional range that would define his later hit. Then came a song he wrote, Baby You're Right. But before he could celebrate, James Brown released a version of the same song. He changed the lyrics, added himself as co-writer, and made it a hit. That was the start of one of the biggest, most personal feuds in soul music. Joe Tex was angry, and he had every right to be. Brown not only took his song, but also started dating Joe's ex-girlfriend, singer B. Ford. After recording a duet with her, Brown sent Joe a note saying, "You can have her back." It was a calculated insult, designed to humiliate. Joe responded the only way he knew how, with music. He released You Keep Her, directly calling out James Brown. It wasn't just a diss track, it was a full-on musical attack that laid bare the personal nature of their conflict. The feud exploded in 1963 in Macon, Georgia. At club, Joe was performing and decided to mock Brown's famous cape routine on stage, complete with exaggerated dramatic gestures that made the audience laugh. It was brilliant theater, but Brown wasn't amused. Reports say James Brown left the club, came back with guns, and started shooting inside the venue. Joe had already left, but innocent people were hurt in the chaos. Some say Otis Redding, who was also performing that night, ducked behind a piano to avoid the gun. Rumors suggest Brown paid people to stay quiet about the incident, afraid of going back to jail. He had already served time for theft as a teenager. Joe later claimed Brown stole his famous mic trick too, the drop and pull move that became Brown's signature. According to Joe, he had been doing that move for years before Brown started using it. It wasn't just a performance war anymore, it was personal, dangerous, and threatening to destroy both their careers. The feud affected both men in different ways. Brown used his growing influence to try to limit Joe's radio play, while Joe struggled to get the recognition he deserved. Industry insiders knew the truth, that Joe Tex was an original, a creator whose ideas were being borrowed without credit. But in the music business, power often mattered more than truth. Even with all the drama, Joe Tex didn't stop recording. He released dozens of songs through the early 1960s, searching for that perfect combination of melody, lyrics, and timing that would break through. Then in 1964, something finally clicked. He recorded Hold What You've Got, a song he didn't even like. The track was about marriage, fidelity, and treating your partner right, themes that Joe felt were too preachy for popular music. But producer Buddy Killen, who had worked with country stars and understood the power of storytelling in music, ignored Joe's doubts and released it anyway. The song blew up across the country. It sold over 200,000 copies and made Joe a star overnight. After nearly 10 years of struggle, rejection and watching others succeed with his ideas, he finally had a hit that was undeniably his own. The success of Hold What You've Got proved that Joe's instincts about connecting with audiences were right. People wanted real music about real situations. They were tired of generic love songs, and wanted artists who would tell them the truth about relationships, life and the struggles they faced every day. From there everything changed. Joe followed with more hits. You Got What It Takes, I Want to Do Everything For You, and A Sweet Woman Like You. His songs were different from what was popular at the time. They were honest, sometimes brutally so. He talked about love, mistakes, regret, and hope in ways people understood. While other artists sang about perfect romance, Joe sang about the reality of relationships, the work, the compromise, the forgiveness required to make love last. In 1966, at the peak of his fame, Joe made a surprising decision that shocked his fans and the music industry. He converted to Islam and changed his name to Yusuf Hazi Eyes. This wasn't a publicity stunt or a career move. It was a genuine spiritual awakening that came from years of searching for meaning beyond fame and success. Joe took time away from music to preach about faith, transformation, and spiritual growth. He studied Islamic texts, learned Arabic prayers, and spoke at mosques about his journey from entertainment to enlightenment. Many fans didn't know what to make of it. Here was their favorite soul singer talking about religion instead of romance, about spiritual fulfillment instead of physical desires. But when he returned to music, the passion was still there, perhaps even stronger. His spiritual journey had given him new perspective on his art and his purpose. He understood that his gift was meant to be shared, that his music could touch people's souls as well as their body. His late 60s hits showed this deeper side. Papa Was Too, a song about absent fathers and their impact on families. Tell You What I Did, a confession of mistakes and redemption. Show Me, a plea for understanding and connection. And Skinny Legs and All, which became a classic. That last song was funny but also profound. He sang about men ashamed of their wives because of how they looked, calling out a culture that judged women unfairly and encouraging people to look beyond surface appearances. Behind the songs, the feud with James Brown continued to simmer. Joe claimed Brown used his growing power and influence to block radio stations from playing Skinny Legs and All, viewing it as competition for his own releases. In response, Joe painted the new Soul Brother #1 on his tour bus, a direct shot at Brown's self-given title. It was a bold move, but one that kept the conflict alive when Joe probably should have focused on his own career. Eventually Joe removed the slogan from his bus, realizing the fight was hurting him more than helping. He had learned that sometimes the best response to adversity is to rise above it, to let your work speak for itself, rather than getting caught up in public battles that distract from your art. As the 1970s began, Joe Tex found a new groove that combined his spiritual insights with his natural entertainment instincts. He released I Gotcha, which became one of his biggest hits ever. It hit #1 on the R&B charts and sold millions of copies worldwide. The song was playful, funky, and irresistible, a perfect example of how Joe could make serious points about relationships while still making people dance. His music became more experimental, funky, and bold. Songs like Give the Baby Anything the Baby Wants, You Said a Bad Word, and Ain't Gonna Bump No More with No Big Fat Woman showed his humor and creativity while addressing social issues. He stayed on the charts with albums like Spills the Beans and Bumps and Bruises, proving that he could evolve with changing musical trends while maintaining his unique voice. He even explored funk and storytelling with tracks like Rub Down, Hungry for Love, and She's in the Room Praying. Each song revealed different aspects of his personality and experience, from sensual to spiritual, from humorous to heartbreaking. But while the hits kept coming, something was changing inside Joe. Success hadn't brought him the satisfaction he expected. The music industry was changing, becoming more corporate and less personal. Younger artists were rising, and Joe felt increasingly disconnected from the direction popular music was taking. He began pulling away from the spotlight, preferring to spend time at his ranch in Navasota, Texas, rather than in recording studios or on concert stages. In 1981, he made one final public appearance with the Soul Clan, a group of veteran R&B performers. Viewers noticed something was wrong. He looked tired, slower, and less like the Joe Tex they remembered. His famous energy seemed dimmed, his movements less fluid. After that performance, he disappeared from the public eye completely. He returned to his quiet ranch, far from the stage and the spotlight. He spent his days with family and friends, living simply, raising cattle, and enjoying the peace that had eluded him during his performing year. But behind the scenes, he was struggling. According to his longtime producer Buddy Killen, Joe battled addiction in his final years, a quiet fight that many never saw. The pressures of fame, the disappointments of the music business, and the toll of decades of performing had taken their toll. It was a battle he fought privately, away from the media attention that had once defined his life. In early August 1982, just after his 47th birthday, Joe Tex was found unconscious in his swimming pool at his Texas ranch. He was rushed to the hospital, revived, and sent home to recover. But days later, on August 13, he died of a heart attack. No fanfare, no tribute concerts, no wall-to-wall media coverage, just silence. One of the most original voices in soul music was gone, and most people didn't even know. At the time of his death, Joe Tex's net worth was around $1 million, comfortable, but not lavish by music industry standards. He had 6 children from different relationships, but he never lived a flashy lifestyle. He invested in his land, stayed away from drugs for most of his life, and kept his private world away from the press. Even now, the details of his estate are mostly unknown. He left behind music, memories, and a quiet house in Texas that now stands forgotten. That house, his ranch in Navasota, is still there, or at least what's left of it. The roof is falling in, the windows are dusty and cracked, the grass is overgrown. It's quiet now, eerily so. You can walk up the gravel driveway and feel the history in the air. This was the home of a man who gave his life to music and got so little in return. Local people still call it Joe Tex's place, but it sits empty, just like his name in the story of soul music, empty when it should be full. And maybe that's the saddest part of all. Joe Tex did everything right. He worked hard, stayed true to his roots, avoided scandals, and gave the world songs that still mean something today. But he didn't play the game. He didn't fake who he was, or compromise his artistic vision for commercial success. He spoke honestly about relationships, spirituality, and social issues when other artists were playing it safe. He influenced countless performers who came after him, from James Brown to modern R&B artists who still use his techniques without knowing where they came from. His songs have been sampled, covered, and referenced by hip-hop artists, country singers, and pop stars. His impact on music is immeasurable, but his recognition is minimal. And for that honest approach, for that refusal to play industry games, the world forgot him. But we don't have to. We can bring his story back. We can remember the man who made soul real, who proved that music could be both entertaining and meaningful, who showed that an artist could be spiritual and sensual, serious and playful, all at the same time. Joe Tex deserves to be remembered, not as a footnote in James Brown's story but as a pioneer in his own right. He deserves recognition for the songs that made people think, the performances that made them feel, and the authentic voice that cut through the noise of the music industry, to speak directly to the human heart. His house may be empty, but his legacy doesn't have to. Every time someone plays I Gotcha or Skinny Legs and All, Joe Tex lives again. Every time an artist chooses honesty over artifice, Joe Tex's influence continued. The man who gave giants their moves may be gone, but his spirit lives on in every genuine performance, every honest song, every artist who refuses to compromise their truth for commercial success. Help us shine a light on Joe Tex. Like, comment, and share to keep his voice alive for the world to hear.